is like, an all-time expert on estate planning. And all of us need to think about what's going to happen with our long-lived birds. Probably not all of you can afford to quit your jobs like I did and become a full-time volunteer and start an organization just to make sure your bird had a future. And even then, who knows, right? So this is really important since birds live a long time, and we are just so honored to have you here, Peggy. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to go off now, and you can start your presentation and we'll get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am just thrilled to be here because this is my all-time favorite topic. And I don't have a ton of experience with birds. I will be quite upfront about that because I have always been a horse, dog, and cat person. And not a bird person, but I like birds. I just don't know anything about them. So there are lots of things that you can teach me, I'm sure, about birds as we go through this process. I feel really fortunate to have gotten to know Anne and the folks at Phoenix Landing and use them as a resource. And I referred a bunch of people over to them. And some of my clients actually were instrumental in introducing me to Phoenix Landing. So thank you for all you do, those of you who are volunteers for them. You can see my picture there. That's me with my little dog Bingo. And I have 6 dogs and 4 horses and 2 cats. And so when I say that all my children wear fur coats, I'm not kidding, because I don't have any of the 2-legged variety children, just the 4-legged variety. So we're going to talk about lots of things today. You're probably going to have a lot of questions. My contact information is going to be at the end, and I welcome your questions and comments and suggestions even. All right, let's just talk about pet ownership in America today real quickly, because it's really kind of astounding, the numbers. 90.5 million households have at least one pet, and that's over 70% of all households in the United States. Dogs tend to be the most popular with over 69 million dogs, followed by cats, 45 million cats. Here's where you guys come in, 9.9 million birds. That's just a tremendous amount of animals. 6.2 million small animals, 5.7 million reptiles. And I always kind of chuckle at this one because I don't know that many people that own reptiles, and yet there's a bunch of them out there. And then 3.5 million people who own horses. And of course, I know lots of those folks. But all of us love our animals. As time goes on, our pets have become more and more integral as part of our family. I think the interesting thing that is happening today is that millennials are now the largest cohort of pet owners, 32%. I think it's also interesting to know that 51% of pet owners are willing to pay more for ethically sourced products and eco-friendly pet products. I know that I am one of those people. I really want to know that the toys that I'm sharing with my pets are eco-friendly. Pet insurance purchases amongst dog and cat owners, and I'm not sure whether there's an insurance available for birds, but that would also be something to look into. I have a type of emergency veterinary surgery insurance for my pets that allows me to cover up to 6 pets at one time for emergency veterinary services. The most universal benefit of pet ownership, and I think we'd all agree with this, is that pets are fun to watch and they're fun to have in our home. I recently became the owner of 2 miniature horses, and I am now known to say that had I known how much fun the minis were going to be, I would have gotten them much, much sooner, because I can go out to my pasture and they just make me laugh. I have always been actively involved with the Humane Society of the United States. I kind of have a unique situation in that regard. My dad was actually the president and CEO of the Humane Society of the United States for 27 years. He took that job when I was 10 years old. So I always say that I grew up in animal welfare. And the Humane Society of the United States reports that we euthanize almost 3 million healthy adoptable cats and dogs in our US shelters every year. And this is about one every 11 seconds. And these are just the healthy adoptable ones. In terms of total animals euthanized annually, we're still in the $3 to $4 million, 3 to 4 million animal range. And to me, that's just heartbreaking and something that I know so many organizations are working to reduce those numbers. Sometimes people are reticent to adopt from a shelter because they say they want purebred pets. And yet 25% of the pets that end up in our shelters are purebred. So my dad coined this phrase and I have adopted it as my own, but I love to say, until there are none, please adopt one. And I would suspect that many of you feel the same way. So what can we do right now today to create a written action plan for our pets? And I think the most important thing we can do is identify at least 2 people. We will call them our pet caregivers to be responsible for our pets, both on a short-term and a long-term basis. So you're looking for people you can rely on short-term, then you're looking for people that you can rely on long-term. And what I suggest that you do is assemble a notebook of all of the important information. I have a form, it's available on my website, that is called Loved Pet Profile, and you could download that and fill it out for your pet, but it tells people all of the important information about your particular pets. And you fill one out for each one of the pets so that you can keep it updated over time as that information changes. The other thing I suggest to folks is that you consider carrying an emergency pet alert card in your wallet. I keep one in my wallet and I keep it right behind my driver's license. Another place that you could put it would be right behind your insurance card, your health insurance card. But it basically is just a card you can make yourself. You can download them from the internet as well, that just let people know that you have pets that are home alone, and it can give the phone number or the contact information for your short-term pet caregiver. The other thing you can do is post an in case of emergency decal or sticker on your doors and windows or the dashboard of your car, again, to let people know that there are animals that are in your home. You might want to detail where they're located in the home. And I think this is particularly important because I have a friend whose family lost their beloved dog when there was a fire at the home, and the first responders were not aware that there was a dog that was actually locked in an interior bathroom. So I would encourage you to think about these in case of emergency stickers. And then last but not least, and of course, the part that's near and dear to my heart is including specific provisions in your estate plan for your pets. And ideally, this would include powers of attorney that have specific provisions regarding the care of our pets, as well as trusts. And I'm going to talk a lot more about trusts as we move through the program. So I had mentioned filling out what I call a forever loved pet profile. This is that document that you would keep in your pet care notebook. And then a copy should be provided to everyone who might eventually care for your pets. And the things that you can include in your pet notebook and on this forever loved pet profile would be things like the age of your animal, their breed, their gender, any identifying marks, their eating habits and food requirements. If you have pets that are picky eaters, you want to make sure that people know what they eat, any special medical conditions that they might have, any sensitivities or allergies to foods or to medicines or to other things, information regarding their veterinary care and your choice of veterinarian and medical history, and then those special traits that only you know about your pet that are really important to share with people. I have a little dog that is an indiscriminate eater, and so you have to know for sure that if she gets into something, she'll probably end up with gastroenteritis. And you know, everybody has their little quirks. My dachshund will kill any toy that has a squeaker in it, and my horses right now, my little stallion, he will bite you if you come into his pen. So you just have to know all these little quirks about how to interact with your animals in the special way that you do, so that others who are stepping into your shoes would not have to learn that the hard way. One of the reasons that I'm so passionate about planning for our pets today is that it is estimated that about 500,000 loved pets are euthanized every year because their pet parent didn't have a plan for them. And it's really easy to create a plan, and there's all kinds of plans that you can do. Pet trusts are going to be at the far end of the spectrum for people that want that extra protection for their pets. But all of us can have a pet plan starting right now today. If you do go down the pet trust trail, pet trusts are now valid in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. I'm happy to report. Minnesota was the last state in our nation to get on board with this. Florida was actually one of the early states, and I was a little surprised at that, but Florida's had pet trust statute now for a long time. And what I've discovered, though, in terms of talking to folks about planning for their pets and creating trusts, is that people were looking for a turnkey pet trust solution, something that would work for every pet owner. And because not everyone wants to go to the lawyer, or not everybody wants to create a custom pet trust. So I created a not-for-profit organization. I call it Animal Care Trust USA. Our motto is keeping loved pets in loving homes. And we actually offer 2 forms of pet trust that you can download from our website. The first one we call the Act for Pets Community Pet Trust. And it's actually a pet trust that you join. It's not one that you have to create or customize in any way, shape, or form. You fill out a joinder agreement and you can join the Act for Pets Community Pet Trust. If you want something that's a little more customizable or personal, thing that you can personalize, you can choose the Forever Loved Pet Trust. And this one allows you to choose your own pet caregivers and your own pet trustees, whereas the Community Pet Trust nominates Animal Care Trust as the pet caregiver to oversee the long-term care of your pet. And then the other thing that you, of course, are welcome to do is create your own custom pet trust with either working with me or working with your own attorney. And then Animal Care Trust USA offers trustee services to do the oversight of the pet trust on behalf of the pets. In terms of our planning options, I'm going to talk about a lot of planning options, but I'm going to talk about those that have the greatest risk to them first. And I think the greatest, well, probably the greatest risk we have is doing nothing, right? That's the greatest risk anybody has in their personal estate plan, is not having an estate plan. And I don't know if this number will surprise you or not, but more than 70% of Americans do not have estate plans. They haven't done anything, including a last will or a financial durable power of attorney. And of the 30% who have done planning, I would suspect that more than half of those plans are more than 5 years old. What I've discovered over my years of practicing is that the average length of time that goes by between updates for people who are working on their estate plans is actually 19.6 years. That's a long time, 20 years. Just think about all the things that have happened in the last 20 years of your life. So the greatest risk is doing nothing. The second greatest risk is leaving an outright distribution of your pet to a pet caregiver. So this would just be a provision in your will or in your living trust that says, I make a distribution of all of my pets, or I make a distribution of my bird Verdi to a specific person, and then just expect that that person's going to be willing to take on that responsibility and provide that lifetime care for your pet. Sometimes people leave money along with the gift of the animal. I always encourage people to leave money, because a gift of a pet without a gift of resources to help care for that pet is probably not a gift at all. It's just a responsibility. The thing that I have seen happen far too often, though, is that people leave an outright distribution of their pet, either with or without money, and the person to whom they've left the pet does not want that responsibility. And that pet then ends up with an uncertain future and may in fact end up at a shelter or in an environment that you would not think would be ideal for your pet. I can think of nothing worse for my pets than ending up in a shelter environment, because most of them were rescued from shelter environments. None of them want to go back there. If you've ever been to a shelter, which I'm sure you have, it's a loud, noisy place with a lot of people coming and going. It's not very homey or comfortable for pets, and many animals that are there are just terrified to be there. So I don't love outright distributions of pets to pet caregivers. I would say that it's better than nothing, but it does certainly have the greatest risk associated with it. The other thing that you could think about is creating a pet trust inside of a last will. This is called a testamentary trust because it's created in your last will and testament. And I don't love pet trusts inside of wills or created as part of wills because of the delays related to probate. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around this concept that we call probate. I like to say that probate is not a four-letter word, so it's not a bad thing, but it is a process, and it's a process that has to go through the court system. It can take time, it certainly costs money, and there can be delays related to the probate process. We're experiencing a lot of delays in the probate courts these days due to the pandemic, number one, but number two, judges that have created processes that really aren't ideal for moving cases through the system. I had a client who created a pet trust for his 5 cats inside of his will, and we actually had a 4-month delay in getting a personal representative appointed for the estate. And that's just a delay that we don't want to have to deal with, because meanwhile, the pets may not be in a circumstance where they're getting the proper care or have access to sufficient resources. One of the things I want to caution you against is don't ever leave money directly to your pet. So you can't create provision in your last will that says, I'm leaving $100,000 to my bird Verdi because pets can't inherit money. Trying to leave money to a pet is it's about the same as trying to leave a table to a chair. The law still looks at pets as being personal property, and personal property cannot inherit property. So moving on to those things that I think offer the greatest protection, they fall into the pet trust category. One would be a pet trust that would be part of your revocable living trust. I call this a standby pet trust. It still arises out of your revocable living trust, but trusts do not require probate. They still require trust administration, but they do not have to go through the formal probate process, and they're not relying on a judge or the delays related to probate court. In that pet trust, you would nominate your pet caregivers, you would nominate your professional pet trustees, and you would leave very specific instructions about how you want your pet to be cared for, along with a sufficient amount of money or resources to provide for the lifetime care of your pet. So that's a standby pet trust. And then there's another version of pet trust that I call a standalone pet trust. And this is a single purpose trust whose sole purpose is to provide for your pets. And it can be separate and apart from your personal revocable living trust. You can direct assets specifically to that trust. You can fund that trust with assets during your lifetime, and it will have provisions in it that address what happens while you are alive and well, what would happen to your pets in the event of your mental disability, your inability to care for your pets while you're still living. And then lastly, provisions related to how to care for your pets after your death. And again, you're going to choose your both short-term and long-term pet caregivers, and you're going to choose your pet trustees. I mentioned here choosing a professional pet trustee because again, friends and family, although we like to rely on them and we think that they'll probably give us the best deal, that isn't always the case, because being a pet trustee is actually a job, and it's one that people need to take seriously, and they need to understand the law of trust and how they are intended to interact with not only the trust, but the pets as well as the pet caregiver. There's 3 options for lifetime care. I call these the forever loved options. The first option I refer to as forever home. And this is an option where the pet parent would determine that they want their pets to remain in their own home with a live-in pet caregiver for the remainder of the pet's lifetime. So this is actually the option that I've chosen for myself. I mentioned at the beginning that I have 4 horses and 6 dogs and 2 cats, and trying to find a pet caregiver to place all of those pets with would be problematic. It's much easier from my perspective to find a person who is willing and able to come and live in my home. So if something happens to me, my pets go nowhere, a pet caregiver comes and lives in my home and takes care of my pets for the remainder of my pet's lifetime. And then when the last of my pets has passed away, that's when that pet trust would terminate, and any remaining pet trust assets would be distributed to my final beneficiaries, who in this particular case are all animal charities. I like charities as final beneficiaries for pet trusts because if you name a human being as that final beneficiary, they may have a motivation to wanting that pet trust to terminate sooner rather than later. And I don't want to create any set of circumstances that's going to put the pets at risk. So that's what I call the forever home option. So the pets stay at home. The forever family option is an option where pets would be rehomed with a new loving family. So the pet does get a new home and it gets a new family. It still has that pet trust that is helping to support its needs so that you know that your pets are being taken care of in the manner that you would like them to be cared for. I've mentioned a couple times a bird by the name of Verdi, and she is currently one of the beneficiaries of a pet trust that I'm in charge of, Verdi the birdie, and she is living her best life at the moment. Of course, her mother passed away, but she has a new forever family, and she's thriving in that environment. The third option here is what I call forever sanctuary. And this is a option where pets go and live in a pet community with other loved pets, like a Phoenix Landing, which would be a sanctuary for birds. Or I have this dream of having a horse sanctuary called All Horses Go to Heaven. But some pets are not suitable for rehoming with a forever family. Not everybody's going to want the forever home option, but for some of our animals, a forever sanctuary will suit their needs the best. One of my clients who had a number of senior cats, we placed his cats with a senior cat sanctuary, and they lived out the rest of their lives in company of other senior cats and well loved and well taken care of. So you're probably aware that more and more people are starting to provide these opportunities for lifetime care for pets, creating organizations that cater to the needs of our loved pets. As I mentioned, I think the standalone pet trust is the best option for taking care of our pets for their lifetime. This pet trust would be created during your lifetime. It takes effect immediately upon creation. It would have all of the provisions in it regarding how you want your pets cared for in the event you become incapacitated or at the time of your death. So let me just mention incapacity for a moment. If I become mentally incapacitated, meaning I'm alive, but I'm not well, I may want a caregiver just to move into my house and take care of my pets while maybe I'm still residing in that environment. Or if I had to go to a long-term care facility, I would still want the person to be able to live in my home, take care of my pets, and then still have the opportunity for interaction with my pets. My pet trust is going to name, again, both my short-term and my long-term pet caregivers. And in every case, I have alternates. I like to have a minimum of 2 alternates for each role. Because if your first person falls out and we go to your second person, I still want to have a third person as a backup. I do encourage you to think about naming a professional pet trustee to ensure the proper use of the funds for the benefit of the pets. Family members and friends, as I mentioned, are not always the best pet trustees because they may not actually do a great job of managing the pet trust assets. The same thing is kind of true for families with minor children. So you might have one set of individuals who would be guardian for the children, and then you might have another group of people or a professional that manages the money for the benefit of the children. In terms of the assets that you would use to fund your trust, funding is a word that we use in the estate planning industry, meaning that we've retitled that asset in the name of the trust, or we've designated the trust as the beneficiary of that asset. But your trust should be funded with a variety of assets. This could include cash assets, things like checking, savings, money market. You can use securities, stocks and bonds and brokerage accounts or mutual funds, retirement plans, your IRA or your 401k can also name your pet trust as a beneficiary. Or you could purchase life insurance specifically for the purpose of funding your pet trust. One of my newest clients just got a $500,000 pet life insurance policy for the purpose of funding his pet trust to take care of his beloved pet pig. So you see, I don't work just with dogs and cats and horses, pigs and birds and chickens and chinchillas and all kinds of animals that are beneficiaries of pet trusts. Any type of pet trust that you do, though, should be part of a broader, comprehensive estate plan for you. Because you can't just protect your pets, you also have to make sure that you're protecting yourself and your assets. And so every comprehensive plan for you should also include a financial durable power of attorney, as well as your healthcare directives, which could include things like a healthcare power of attorney, a living will, anatomical gift declaration, memorial instructions. There's lots of ways to create a comprehensive plan for yourself. In terms of calculating the cost of care, how much money should we leave? Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into calculating the cost of our pet's lifetime care. And so the things that you want to think about as you're calculating these numbers are: what types of pet do you have? What are the ages of those pets? Obviously, because I have horses, they cost more than dogs and cats to take care of. I would suspect that birds cost more to take care of than cats, and maybe even dogs. The age of our pets is going to be important, especially in the bird world, because our birds can live a really long time, as you well know. I have 2 miniature horses that are under the age of 3, and they could easily live to be 40 years of age. So I have to take that into consideration. I also want to take into consideration what I spend for them, not only for food, but also for medicines that would include any kind of monthly flea treatment, heartworm preventative, or other monthly supplements that I might be providing for my pets. Toys and treats, got to take that into consideration because all of our animals love to have those. Veterinary care, not just the annual cost of veterinary care, but taking into consideration what would happen if we had chronic or the need for catastrophic care. And this is where pet health insurance might come into play for some of you. It might be a way to have some certainty around what veterinary care might cost on an annual basis if we're trying to plan for that. If you have boarding and grooming costs, you're going to want to include those. I jokingly say that my horses get a pedicure every month. I don't personally, but all my horses do. So the farrier comes every 4 weeks for them. And then I don't want you to forget about that end of life care. How do we want our pets cared for at the end of their lifetime? We want to talk about what circumstances would it be appropriate to consider euthanizing a pet? Do we want that pet to be cremated or buried? And then what are the final disposition options that we would want for our pets? Most of my pets have been cremated, and unfortunately I have a growing number of boxes in my closet holding the remains of those pets. Horses that have died on my property have been buried here at my property. I have a couple of dogs that are buried here, but mostly my pets have been cremated. And one of the reasons that that gives me comfort is that right now I know that I can take those cremains with me when I move to my farm in Virginia someday and create a little pet cemetery up there to celebrate the life of my pets. So those are all of the kind of the factors that you want to take into consideration. So figure out, what do you spend now for your pets, taking into consideration all of these things, and then multiply that number by, I always say, an extraordinarily long lifetime. Because that helps us kind of figure in that chronic and catastrophic care buffer. So if you think you have a dog that's going to live for 15 years, I would assume that dog's going to live for 20 years. If I have a horse I think is going to live for 30 years, I'm going to assume that horse is going to live for 35 years. And birds, depending on the type of bird that you have, if it's a bird that lives to be 50, I would probably assume that it's going to live to be 60, just to have that additional buffer for those chronic or catastrophic care costs. The other thing you want to think about in your cost of care is, are you going to compensate your pet caregiver? What are they entitled to receive as compensation or reimbursement of their expenses? I don't think it's fair to assume that people are going to take care of our animals forever without some sort of compensation. Certainly anybody that would come to live in my home with my pets would get the benefit of a free place to live, basically forever, and then a stipend for their ongoing compensation, reimbursement for all expenses, of course. And because I've chosen the forever home option, I also have to take into consideration paying off my mortgage, any taxes, insurance, utilities, and the maintenance of my home. So I have a client who left about $900,000 for the care of his dachshunds because he wanted them to remain at home, and they live in a really nice neighborhood. And that was the amount of money that he calculated with my help to determine that his dogs could live at home for the rest of their lifetime. And then you also want to think about trustees' fees, if there's going to be any, how that factors into the amount of money that you're leaving. I have created an online calculator. It's just a little Excel formula sheet that can help you figure out your costs. But I think if you follow the guidelines that we've talked about, you will be able to figure out what a good number is for you. I mentioned the various assets that you can use to fund your pet trust. This is just a review of those. All of your checking, savings, CDs, money markets, stocks and bonds, real property. So my home would become part of my trust because of the fact that I've chosen this forever home option. Any personal property, things like trucks, trailers, furniture, cages, any of the accoutrement that you have in your house that would go along with furnishing the house for both your pets and your pet caregiver. Life insurance and annuities can also be used to fund your pet trust, as well as your retirement plans, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, Roth IRAs. I also point out here that if you are charitably inclined, a retirement plan is probably one of the best assets to choose to leave to the benefit of a charity, because when we leave retirement plans to people, they have to pay taxes on it. But when we leave retirement plans to charities, they get the full benefit of that asset. They don't have to pay any income tax. So $100,000 left to a person might be reduced to $80,000 after we pay taxes, but for a charity, they would get that full $100,000. I would say that my motto is get a pet trust today. I think you can see that I'm passionate about that. My phone number is listed on this page. If you want to visit the website actforpets.org, you can get more information there. My personal email address is on here as well. And I'm going to open up for questions that you might have. And Anne, you can either read me the question.
I can. Thanks, Peggy. I wanted to apologize to everybody first that for some reason the chat is malfunctioning today. I just updated the Zoom software, so I guess I did something wrong. So I apologize to everybody for that. But they have been using the Q&A as a place for that as well. So also, thanks for bringing up emergencies, Peggy, because a lot of people don't think of that. We had a blue and gold adopter who just had a fire in her attic this week, and she learned the hard way about, getting things out as fast as possible, and the bird came first. Yay. But Lisa Bono had a really good question about if you have an alarm system, should you let them know about the pets in your home and maybe even where they are in your home? Would that be helpful for an alarm company?
Absolutely. If they're willing to accept that information, I think that's terrific. And I think that just goes hand in hand with putting those stickers on, your front windows or your doors. I'm always tempted to, when my garage door is down, I'm tempted to just paint right on my garage door the number of animals that are on my property or in my house, because it seems to me like that would be a great way, big, bold way to say what's there. And maybe if a burglar thought that there were 6 dogs in my house, they might choose a different house as well.
Yeah, I guess we have to be kind of careful in the bird world. Sometimes we're targets for theft, so we're a little judicious about that.
Yeah, we would not want to encourage people that way.
Yeah. One of the biggest takeaways for me today, having managed a couple of complicated probates, is your recommendation for a trust because it doesn't require probate. That is magnificent, to the point, really welcome information that I think everybody should take to heart, even if they just buy a simple insurance policy and put it in the trust or something, something low cost, but definitive. Yeah.
Super simple thing to do. I think that my friend who's an insurance agent who sold the policy for Stella the pig, it was $500,000 policy, and I think it's costing him like $250 a year. I mean, it's really a low cost item for him. It's a 15-year term policy, which should last for Stella's lifetime. And it's guaranteed money. Only thing we have to present to get that money is going to be a death certificate. and death certificates are usually available within 5 to 10 days of date of
Right.
death. So you don't have this long drawn out process like my other client where we had to wait for 4 months, literally.
And the same about your recommendation for IRAs and Roths, et cetera, in the probate I just managed, that money moved really fast to the recipients, and it was so much less complicated than everything else involved in that arduous effort. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
I was going to say absolutely, because again, all you have to do is fill out a claim form and provide a death certificate.
Exactly. And then of course, in the bird world, we're a little bit different in that some of our birds, we know some birds that are 90, 100. I mean, we aspire to our birds having their full lives. That's not always possible in captivity, but because of that, we know as an adoption organization that it's very rare for one person to have the bird their whole lives, or to know somebody that can close out the remainder of a bird's life. And I personally, no offense to any organizations out there, but I am not a fan of sanctuaries for many reasons. They come and go. They start off with great ideals, but for really long-lived animals, they often just can't sustain themselves. And I just don't think any bird should go from a good life to a bad life, bad life to good life to good life, but not good life to bad life. And I'm not sure I'm not sure who we can recommend in that regard. So the word forever to me, it can be worrisome because people think they've made a plan, but maybe it's not forever. And so how do you deal with that? I mean, I know when birds come to us, we make people sign contracts first that the bird will come back to us when they need their next home, not if, but when they need their next home, so that we don't lose that legal custody. But
Absolutely.
It's a complicated issue for birds.
Well, and I know that you are a big proponent of what I would call the forever family, making sure that they go to a new family. And I think ideally that's going to be the best option for most animals, is having that new loving family that's willing to take on the responsibility for them, with the understanding, as you said, that family may not outlive the lifetime of that animal either. And so then there has to be an ongoing plan for the next forever family. And you're absolutely right. Even though sanctuaries and refuges are organizations that theoretically have an unlimited lifetime, they don't really have an unlimited lifetime. They generally have the lifetime of their founder, unless they have a particularly good board of directors and sufficient funding to be able to continue the operation of that organization over a long period of time. So yes, there's pros and cons for every single one of the options. I think it's really important just to have the conversation around each one of those options so that people can make an informed decision about what's going to be best for them.
Right. So in the spirit of this conversation, Diana had a good question about whether a sanctuary or refuge can be designated as the caregiver or trustee. How would you label that if they were leaving their bird to an organization like that?
So I think they could do that, Diana, but I think that you have to take into consideration the things that we were just saying. The quality of the organization that you're choosing, what their current longevity is, what their plans are for the future. I think one of the things we don't ask organizations is, what's your plan for the future? So who takes over if something happens to Peggy Hoyt, or who takes over if something happens to Anne? And in my law practice, I think it's interesting because my clients do ask me that a lot. They say, what happens to me if something happens to you? And fortunately, we've thought about that as a law firm, because I'm the senior member of our law firm in terms of age. And then my partner is 10 years younger than me. And then we have another partner who's 8 years younger than him, and another partner who's 8 years younger than her. So we keep trying to bring them in from, every time somebody moves into the next decade, we try to bring in the youngest decade that we can bring in so that we have that longevity.
I agree. Sustainability, I think, is the key to any organization's, ability to actually do the work over the long term. I
Absolutely.
know it's something I think about every day. So I'm just curious, growing up with your dad, the president of the Humane Society, how was that growing up in a family that was so animal oriented like that?
Oh, I loved it because I always believed that I was the bigger animal lover. Um, I thought, how in the world did my dad get that job when I'm the one that loves animals so much? But he had a passion for causes, and he had started his professional career as a minister. And I think for him, this was just a continuation of that ministry, but one that was dedicated to animal welfare. And so it was awesome because I got to meet a lot of really cool people, including Betty White.
Oh, lucky you.
Yes. So, and Jane Goodall, and lots of really cool people in the animal world.
That's wonderful. Did he have a lot of horror stories too that you had to hear about? I just,
Well, there are always a lot of horror stories in the animal world, as you can imagine, and HSUS takes on a lot of global initiatives. So, he was involved in things like the beating of baby seals, and the ivory trade, and the dehorning of rhinoceros, and all of those horrific things. Not to belittle any of the other domestic issues that we have, from anything from the overpopulation of dogs and cats to puppy mills to inhumane slaughter, all kinds of issues, factory farming. For those of us involved in animal welfare, we will never run out of issues, I'm afraid.
That's true. Did you get to meet Temple Grandin by any chance?
I didn't, but my dad did.
Oh, yes, she's such an icon. Oh, my goodness.
Me too.
You had mentioned several times about a professional pet trustee. How does one go about finding that person?
Okay, so CPAs, attorneys can be professional trustees. Trust companies, of course, can be professional trustees. And then Animal Care Trust USA has also been set up to be a charity that is qualified to act as a trustee. And the one thing I would point out about trust companies in particular is that many of them have very high minimums. So they may not be willing to take on the responsibility for a pet trust. I had this happen in one of my client cases where her estate at one time was over $1 million, but at the time of her death, it was only a couple $100,000. And the trust company that was nominated to be her trustee would not assume that responsibility because of the size of her estate. So I think that's something that you have to keep in mind as you're selecting those trustees. I recommend professionals, either professional people or professional organizations, because they tend to have more knowledge and longevity for how to handle trusts over a longer period of time.
So when you say professional, it can mean lawyer, CPA. It's not necessarily like there's a database of professional pet trustees somewhere.
Nope, there really isn't. It can be lawyers, CPAs. It can be, there's organizations across the country of professional fiduciaries, people who are willing to take on these responsibilities. And I like to think that Animal Care Trust is unique in the sense that we really are the only pet trustee or trustee that's dedicated just to pet trusts.
Yeah, exactly. Patty Dewey is with us today. Apparently she worked for your dad, she says. So she wants to know how to make sure your durable power of attorney places the animals even temporarily with the person you've appointed.
So in a power of attorney, there's two types of powers of attorney really when it comes to animals. One is what I call a pet care power of attorney, which is one that you would use for a pet caregiver who might be taking on the responsibility for your pet if you were going out of town, for example. So when I go out of town, my pet sitter has a pet care power of attorney that allows her to make veterinary care decisions for my pets in my absence. if I become mentally incapacitated, my financial durable power of attorney has a provision in it that nominates my agent to be able to spend my resources for the care of my pets. The same thing's true in my revocable living trust. My successor trustee has the ability during any time period where I might be disabled to spend my money to care for my pets.
I think that's exactly what she was asking, to be ready on any circumstance, even if it's temporarily while she's still alive. So that's good. Somebody whose internet went out asked us to revisit the issue of, if you have limited resources, what's the best way to prepare for the future of your animals?
So limited resources, certainly that is a challenge for some of us. And I think life insurance is one way, but not everybody is going to either qualify or be able to afford life insurance. I think you have to then really work on those relationship aspects of who would be willing to take on the responsibility of your pets. Not everybody wants to get paid to take care of animals. Certainly I would take on the responsibility for pets of friends and family if they needed me to do that. But it is a challenge. So you really have to look to all your resources and think about what are the options that are available. Many shelters these days are offering programs that in exchange for donations, they're willing to take on the responsibility for your pets. Again, not a huge fan of loved pets going to shelters, but in many cases, the shelters are placing them in foster homes until they can be placed with their forever family.
Great. Somebody from Canada wants to know if you know anything about trusts in Canada.
I do not. I wish I did. I believe there is a trust for pets in Canada, but I do not know that for a fact. And I only say that because once upon a time I came across a guy who was Canadian, and I believe that is what he was working on.
Very good. And Kay wanted to know if she could leave her parrots and her house to a particular sanctuary. Of course,
absolutely.
She can do anything she wants.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I would have that conversation with them ahead of time, just to make sure that they're on board for that. And I can see, Anne, that somebody's asking you if they can name Phoenix Landing as a trustee and pet caregiver.
Yeah, maybe you can answer that question more specifically there, because I'm not sure I understand what she's asking.
So I think she's asking you whether Phoenix Landing would be willing to act in that trustee role, and whether or not Phoenix Landing would be willing to be the short-term caregiver until such time as the forever family could be identified.
That does happen. We have quite a few people who have already sent in their information and are on our quote wait list in an estate planning capacity, so that because every day brings new relinquishments, and sometimes we have lots of birds waiting for our help. So we would take the people who've been asking for us to help them in an estate capacity, we put them at the top of the list. So of course, finding a home is always the question. You can't just suddenly take a bird and have nowhere to put it. So that's often the problem. But to date, we've been able to help anybody in an emergency situation like that. What we don't have is temporary homes for people who just need help for the short term. That's really hard for us to do, because if we have a home, we've put a bird in it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If someone raises their hand and says, I'm willing to take on that responsibility, you're going to have a foster that needs to go there.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, there are a few people here and there who have come and gone over the years to help on an emergency basis, but every day is a new day in terms of who's available and what they can do to help. So, but to answer her question specifically, we can definitely be named as the trustee and have been. And I encourage people to make clear in their wills what it is they want. So
yeah, wills or trusts, and just to be real clear that there's a big difference between wills and trusts.
Thank you. That's the important point of today. Yeah.
Interchangeably, one meaning one for the other. Hey, Lisa, I'm sorry I confused you. Yeah, the life insurance is on the human's life. for the benefit of the pet, not on the life of the pet.
Do you want to say the question? I'm not sure people understand what you're answering.
Okay, so Lisa says, I was a little confused. I thought the policy was for the pet's life, but I understand it is the human gets the life insurance to leave to the pets through the pet trust. And that's exactly right. So
Correct.
for example, I actually have $1 million life insurance policy that would go to my revocable living trust and flow through down for the benefit of my spouse and my pets. Now, I usually pick on my husband when I'm telling these stories because the trust that I've left for the benefit of my husband also includes my pets. And I don't always say that it's in exactly that order. Could be first, him second. But one of the reasons that I've done it that way is not because I don't trust my spouse, but because I don't trust the world. And I have seen on more than one occasion where a very loving spouse, after the death of their current spouse, falls in love with somebody else. And that person doesn't necessarily have the same commitment to your animals that your spouse would have or that you had. And so I think it's just important to make sure that that trust has ongoing provisions. My husband is free to marry Bambi the bimbo if he wants to. She just doesn't get to have access to my money for the care of my pets.
Yeah. That's good life advice, Peggy. Very good life advice.
I call that Biff and Bambi protection.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know that you can get, we had a really valuable, important, beloved volunteer die of COVID, and she had been paying like $15 a month into a life insurance policy so that when she died a couple of years ago, we were able to get the resources for her birds, the vet work, the cages, etc. So I think that's a great way to go for something that doesn't cost a whole lot every month. Yeah.
Yes, the main thing is to get it while you're young and get it while you're healthy. If you have kind of missed that boat, then there's other things you can do, but you've got to start that saving process for the pets. I gave up my pet health insurance, not the emergency veterinary insurance, but the day-to-day health insurance, because every year they were raising the rates and I wasn't getting any benefit from those. And, when you're paying $50 or $80 a month per pet, that's a lot of money that you feel like you're flushing down the toilet. So I just created a sinking fund, if you will, but it's just a savings account where I transfer that money to the account every month. And then I'm happy to see that it's growing over time so that if I do have an unexpected pet emergency, I've got this slush fund, if you will, to help me get over that hurdle.
Yep. Their own checking account. That's a good, or savings account. That's great. Yeah, I did a life insurance policy for my guys a long time ago, but I think I have to die by 80 for it to be good or something. So,
oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. So since age is creeping up faster than I expected it to at this point. So if anybody goes out and gets one today, get one for a really long time so that, you don't die the day after it expires.
Well, or you can look in like your AARP magazine, for example. And they do have those, their whole life policies. They're a little more expensive, but I think that they can't turn you down. So you can get one for 10 or 20 or $50,000, not, a tremendous amount of money, but enough to really leave a boost for your pet or an organization that would be willing to take on the responsibility of your pet.
That's a great idea. One last question. Do the annual administrative fees, Animal Care Trust USA, start after the death of the trustee or from the time of the trust establishment?
That's a very good question. So no administrative fees while you're alive and well, other than I do ask the people that sign up for my community pet trust or my forever loved pet trust, where they want Animal Care Trust to serve, to enroll in what we call the pet protection plan. And that's a plan where they're making regular periodic donations to our organization so that we know what pets are in the pipeline.
That makes sense. That sounds good.
Yep.
Well, you have been a marvel of information today, as always, and a pleasure, and doing great work. And I'm sure everybody today has got a lot to think about and go take care of, hopefully. And any last takeaways you'd like people to have?
I would say get a copy of my book, All My Children Wear Fur Coats, How to Leave a Legacy for Your Pet. Check out our website at actforpets.org. You can also check out my newest book on Amazon called 101 Ways to F Up Your Estate. It is an Amazon bestseller in 7 categories, and it's a very in-your-face, quick read, but talks about all the ways that things that we can do so that we don't leave a disaster in our wake.
That's great. And I want to put a pitch in for your podcast too, which I was honored to be one of your guests to talk about birds. It's a great resource. And I'm sure a lot of people here today have more than birds, and there's a lot to learn on your podcast about animals of all kinds.
We have lots of really exciting guests on the show. I've met so many wonderful people and have talked to so many wonderful organizations, not the least of which is Phoenix Landing. So I was so pleased to get to know you, but have a lot of interesting people coming up. I've been doing this 7 or 8 years now, so there's lots and lots of stuff in the archives. And you can find All My Children Wear Fur Coats wherever you get your favorite podcast.
It's fantastic. Well, thank you today for being here today, Peggy. We're very honored and that you've given us your time, because I know you're busy. Aren't all lawyers very busy?
Yes, a little less busy on a Saturday, so that was a good thing. Had a lovely riding lesson on my new horse this morning, and was looking forward to sharing with you folks. So thanks to everybody who joined us today.
Thanks. Everybody take care. Don't get too hot. Stay well. Talk to you soon. Join us on August 20th for our next class about behavior. Can never talk about behavior enough. Even if you've been to that class before, you'll always learn something new. So thanks for helping parrots, everybody. Bye.
Bye.